Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September reading of Café Muse. Thank you, Michael Davis, for sharing your classical guitar music, and Henry Crawford for your beautiful photos. I'm Susan Oakey, and I'm hosting tonight along with my co-host Ellen Cole and our series founder, Karen Alanier. Our technical guru, Henry Crawford, is behind the scenes. We're proud that Café Muse Literary Salon is in its 23rd year of outstanding programs. Tonight, we're excited to present poets Andrea Carter-Brown and Katherine Gekker. I will introduce Andrea and Ellen will introduce Katherine. We encourage you to buy our featured authors' books and to donate to Café Muse to support our literary programs. In the chat, you will find the links for buying their books and for making a donation to our reading series. You may notice that audience members have been muted. This helps ensure uninterrupted programming. Please bear with us if we do encounter a technical glitch. During the reading, you may use the chat to comment or to ask a question that our readers may answer during the Q&A period after the readings if time permits. Our program is scheduled for 1 hour. On Wednesday, September 22nd at 7 p.m., Poets versus the Pandemic will present poet Hiram LaRue reading from his new book, Mud Ajar, along with guest poets Lauren Camp and Carolyn Joyner. Our next Café Muse reading on Monday, October 4th, 2021, will present Leah Johnson and Kiki Petrosino, starting like this one at 7:30 p.m. and lasting for an hour. I will now introduce our first featured poet. Those of us who've lived in the DC area long enough have our personal memories of what happened in our city 20 years ago this past Saturday, when a commercial jet was hijacked by terrorists and flown into the Pentagon. Tonight, we're about to hear poems by the author of a remarkable book that memorializes the events of that terrible day in New York and its aftermath. First, a very brief excerpt from the book. Don't worry, Angel says. Everything will be okay. It's a doorman's job to reassure. But I know he is wrong. How could two such tall buildings on fire within not come down? Poet Andrea Carter-Brown lived a block from the World Trade Center. On the morning of September 11, 2001, she was reading the newspaper when her sister called from North Carolina, having just seen the news that a plane had hit one of the towers. From that moment, Brown became an eyewitness, an ear witness, a witness of the disappeared, a chronicler of that unforgettable late summer morning in her beloved city. Her new poetry collection, September 12, has just been published by the WordWorks for the 20th anniversary of 9/11. A more haunting memorial to 9/11 than this book will be hard to find, writes poet Martha Collins. Reading September 12 is a wrenching but restorative experience you won't soon forget. Cynthia Hogue writes, this brave book documents great loss, but also hard-won psychic resilience in poems of astonishing beauty and wisdom. Brown's account in poetry of the attack and its effect on New York and New Yorkers won the James Dickey Prize from 5 Points, the River Styx International Poetry Prize, the Pudding House Press Chapbook Competition, the MacGuffin National Poet Hunt, and is cited in the Library of Congress online research guide to the poetry of 9/11. She is the author of 3 previous poetry collections and 2 chapbooks. Her work has appeared in many leading journals, and she was a founding editor of the journal Barrow Street. In 2017, she joined the WordWorks and serves as series editor for the Washington Prize, their longest running poetry book contest and imprint. An avid birder and backyard citrus farmer, she lives in Los Angeles with her husband, Thomas Drescher. Friends, please welcome poet Andrea Carter-Brown.
Thank you, Susan. It's an honor to be introduced by someone who is herself such a wonderful poet. I'd like to thank Henry Crawford, Michael Davis, and the entire team at Café Muse for running a series which is always beautiful and stimulating. I'm thrilled to be part of it. And I'd like to thank the WordWorks for doing such an incredible job with my book. I have to show it off to everyone. I'm so thrilled with what they did. Susan's filled in the general outlines of my adventures that day. So I'm going to flesh it out with my readings today. But before I get into my adventure, as I've come to call it 20 years later, the first section of the book is called Cloud Studies, Hudson River School. And it's an extended elegy about life living, contemplating the Hudson River before the World Trade Center came down. The first poem in that section is called The Magic Hour. All of these poems are homages to different visual artists. This one is to Frederick Olmsted, who designed Central Park and many, many other gardens. And it takes place in Battery Park City, where I lived, before it was built up, when the landfill was still settling, that had been dumped among the piers in the Hudson River from the excavations of the foundations for the World Trade Center. The Magic Hour. Leaning on the balustrade like spoons, your arms around my midriff, the river at our feet. We hear the wing flap first, a sharp crack that startles until a dark shape flies past, stitching sky to water. Without thinking, we too head south, beyond streets to gardens still blueprints and clean fill, overgrown with weeds. Pressed against a plastic cyclone fence, you breathe between your lips in sibilance. Psht, psht, imitating hungry hatchlings as your grandparents birding in Central Park taught you decades ago. I've seen flamingos and bald eagles mistake you for their babies at the zoo, but hear no rustle answers to your call. To lover's neck in the fragrant dusk, pupils dilated, we peer into the understory of pitch pine and wild rose. Nothing stirs. We give up, stroll home, not certain what kind of night heron it was, while the Hudson, mirroring the luminous sky above us, rushes upstream, garish as a bad bruise, as it begins to heal. The second section of the book is titled September 12th, and it is in fact the title poem, a long prose poem sequence about my experiences from the moment I first saw the North Tower on fire until 12 hours later, I was reunited with my husband in Westchester County. I'm going to pick up and read just the completion of the section that Susan read in her introduction. Angel actually pronounced his name Angel. So she concluded, for now, and this is me speaking, standing outside the building lobby in the courtyard, I can see both towers, can see thick black smoke, orange and red flames, can hear explosions, the steel groaning as it softens and sways, the crackle glass makes shattering. A man hurls an office chair repeatedly against a window on a high floor. At another, glass already gone, two women perch side by side on the narrow sill, hold hands, pause a moment, jump. Unlike most people, I fled south instead of north and ended up taking the Staten Island ferry to Staten Island, where I didn't know anyone. And there I met with the kindness of many strangers. And this describes an early scene in that part of my day. One by one, other survivors arrive. The secretary who crawled under a bush in Trinity Cemetery because she couldn't breathe. A boy on a field trip, separated from his fifth grade class. A pair of backpackers from Australia. The frantic woman wearing a satin kimono and fluffy pink mules, ordered to flee as she was taking a shower in her hotel. She lost track of her husband running down West Street. And the supervisor from the phone company. I ordered my repair crew into the South Tower minutes before it fell. The woman mumbles to herself. From the back, she looks ancient. Neat braids coiled around her head are powdery white, as are her neck, arms, hands, her face, but not the small square on her forearm, which she rubs obsessively, revealing a patch of ebony. Queens, she answered when asked where she lives. No relatives up north, yes, I am all alone. She doesn't want help, doesn't need help, she insists, all the while trying to remove the gritty pale ash from her arm, brushing at it, flicking, rubbing, then digging at it until blood comes. I ordered my repair crew into the South Tower. The next section is it is the central section of the book. It's called The Rock and the Glen, and it memorializes the 11 residents who came from the town where I grew up, Glen Rock, New Jersey, and died that morning. And I want to read two portraits of them. Anthony. I am not worried. Dad will make it out. His 11-year-old daughter believes for the longest time. She is his whole world, his mother adds. He's a great father. They go everywhere together. Ice skating shows, gymnastics, Yankee Stadium, the racetrack. Against all odds, 6 months later, his daughter still believes her father made it out from the 101st floor. Daniel. As a boy, Dan worshiped the volunteer firefighter who lived next door. At 18, as soon as he could, he became one too. In the newspaper photo propped on his mother's mantle, he stands in a basket 60 feet up, feeding water on flames. Grown up, he specialized in fire safety risk analysis for skyscrapers. Early to work every morning on the 98th floor, no one doubts Dan would be the last one out after everyone else is safe. Those poems are culled from contemporary sources, obituaries, memorial notices, interviews with friends and family. The next section is the aftermath section. It begins the night of September 11th, and it continues basically to the present day. I'm going to read a few poems from this. Let me check my time. And I'm reading the first poem at Susan's request. The Kiss. 1. Your story. I didn't know anything was happening until I walked into the meeting. The TV was on. Both towers were on fire. Not a minute later, the South Tower collapsed. Knowing you were home, waiting for the rug guys, that moment, I was certain you were dead. How could anyone a block away survive? I turned to Andy and said, my wife is dead. Then I started to worry it was worse. You were hurt, trapped, in pain, and I wouldn't be able to help. I hope then you were dead. That would be better. I don't know what I did after that. I tried your cell, couldn't get through. Andy took me back to his house. We sat together, watching the TV, waiting for news, not knowing what had happened to you. I was glad I had gone back to kiss you a second time before leaving. Do you remember that? 2. Mine. Dimly, I remember your cheeks, plump and soft, and your warm breath blowing close to my face. Buried in that cloud of pillows, your full lips just touching mine. Did I hear your whispered, I love you? I don't know. I drifted back to sleep. Only late that night, September 11th, when you ask, do your words come back, as in a dream? And because today is September 13th, I'm going to read the poem in the book that takes place on September 13th, 20 years ago. I figured this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. If you've been in any kind of disaster, you realize you're lucky to escape with your life, and you flee with nothing. I left that morning in dirty clothes. I didn't have a bra on. I didn't have a belt. I didn't have my full pocketbook. My cell phone was half dead. So at some point, you realize life goes on and you have to put your life back together. And this was the beginning of that. The title is Shopping Spree, September 13th. Hardware store first. Flashlights, batteries, rubber gloves, dusk masks. Who knew there were so many kinds? All required to be allowed anywhere near the site. Sporting goods next for backpacks, windbreakers, umbrellas, cheap sneakers to throw away after they are used. On to the drugstore, disposable washcloths, toothbrushes and paste, shampoo, soap, razor brush, what else? Oops, forgot deodorant, tampons. Who knows how long we'll be living out of bags? Last stop, the Gap, where the single salesperson looks on in shock as we grab jeans, tops, a belt apiece, sweatshirts, without thinking, all in shades of gray. A week's worth of socks and underwear, but they don't carry bras. Guess I'll have to keep wearing the one Leslie lent me. Shopping wasn't fun. Later, we crammed the lot into 2 knapsacks, ready for anything, we hope. So I'm going to return briefly to the narrative sequence to read what happened 4 days later when we returned to our apartment for the first time. 4 days later, Saturday, September 15th, Tom and I go home for the first time under armed National Guard escort. Flashlights on, dusk masks positioned over nose and mouth. We walk through the lobby, up 5 flights of stairs and down dark hallways, reeking of spoiled food. Inside the apartment, dirty white dust covers everything. The dust contains ashes of the thousands who died 4 mornings ago. We know this without being told. The dead now lie in our house, now cover every surface. They coat silverware, the runners on which drawers open and close. They sleep in book bindings. They seep between pages and underneath volumes packed tight on shelves. They find corners of closets where we haven't looked in years. Yes, the dead are with us, will always be with us. Our home has become theirs. We hesitate to disturb their final resting place. Leave them in peace if there can be any. As for the living, I long to simply walk away, take nothing, and never come back. So as we continued living on the site, adjacent to the site, we missed many things, and some of them are memorialized in this poem. It's called The Old Neighborhood. Where is the man who sold the best jelly donuts and coffee you sipped, raising a blue Acropolis to your lips? The twin brothers who arrived in time for lunch hour with hot and cold heroes, where liberty dead ends at the Hudson, the courteous small-boned Egyptian in white robe and crocheted skullcap in the parking lot behind the Greek Orthodox shrine, whose bananas and dates you could always count on. How about the tall, slim, dark brown man with dreadlocks cascading to his waist, who grilled Hebrew National Franks to perfection and knew just the right amount of mustard each Knish wanted? The cinnamon-skinned woman for whose roti people lined up halfway down church, the falafel cousins who remembered how much hot pepper you preferred. Don't forget the farmers who schlepped up from Cape May twice each week at dawn to bring us whatever was in season at its peak. Last August, blueberries and white peaches. What about the lanky fellow who sold green and red and yellow bears and fish and snakes in plastic sandwich bags with twist ties? His friend a block away who scooped still warm nuts from a copper cauldron into palm-sized wax paper sacks he twisted at the corners to close. The couple outside the post office with their neatly laid out golden books. The shy Senegalese with the briefcases of watches, except in December when they sold Christmas trees. The Mr. Softy who parked every evening rush hour by the cemetery to revive the homeward hurrying crowd. I know none of their names, but I can see their faces, clear as I still see everything from that day, as I ride away from the place we once shared. Where are they now, and how? And I'm going to end with two short poems. I think I have time for that. Do I, Susan? Okay. I know I'm reading to a lot of poets here, and we've probably all written at least one of these. And this is mine for this book. It's called Ars Poetica. Let's not romanticize bodies falling. Others may use float or dance. I refuse to pretend. They were not graceful, quiet. They fell unbelievably fast, straight down, head first. Some screamed. The sound they made landing, forget, thud, louder than the wind. And my last poem not only brings us to the present, but takes us far into the future. It's called To the Dust. In our eyes, in the corner of a pocket, under a bed, on top of books, behind them, along a windowsill. Trapped by screens, glass, suspended in the air, it sticks to needles, leaves, to branches, bark, shrubs, mulch, to soil. On puddles, it floats. In gutters, down streams to rivers, flowing into the ocean, until currents, slowing, can carry the load no longer. It drifts to the bottom of the sea, waits as mud. Sediments compress, solidify, a record in stone, a world as once it was. Thank you.
Andrea, that was just wonderful. You know, I lived through 9/11, and your poems speak so clearly to the horrors of that day. It was so moving to hear them. Our next reader is my dear friend, Katherine Gekker, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce her to you. Katherine was born here in DC, and she has a master's in English literature. She started her own printing business from scratch at the age of 24, which is a time when I was basically just wandering around in a stupor. So it amazes me that she could do that. And she sold it 31 years later. She taught as an adjunct professor for a number of years at Northern Virginia Community College. Katherine is a pianist as well as a poet and practices both daily. Her debut book, In Search of Warm, Breathing Things, was published by Glass Lyre Press in 2019. She's also been published widely in literary journals, including Apple Valley Review, Little Patuxent Review, Poetry South, Cobalt Review, and many others. She's been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and for the Best of the Net. Katherine has been influenced by the work of Mark Doty, Ellen Bass, Marie Howe, Lucille Clifton, and Carl Phillips. Her book shows her ability to write about loss, love, and anger, using images of the natural world as a scaffolding to reveal the speaker's inner life. She uses received forms fluently and creates her own. For instance, in one poem, she uses the dictionary structure of grammar to write about anger during the dissolution of a marriage. And the cleverness of it made me laugh, even as the speaker's anguish resonated with me. Her writing is lyric and confident and reflects her love for the beauty of our world. So I am now going to introduce Katherine and let her take it away.
Well, Ellen, thank you. That's a very generous introduction, and it's especially meaningful coming from a poet I admire. You're my friend, and you're my fellow poet. Thank you. Andrea, wow. I was scribbling notes the whole time you were reading. What a powerful, touching, moving set of poems. The dead now lie in our house. Our home has become theirs. Well, I could go on, but that one really just got me. Words come back as in a dream. I'll stop. That's enough. But it's a powerful, powerful collection. Congratulations. I'm joining you from my home in Arlington, Virginia, where a nearby park has been renamed for the Native American poet Zitkala Shah. Zitkala Shah was also a musician, essayist, and educator. She co-wrote one of the first operas that dealt extensively with indigenous themes and subjects. And Zitkala Shah is buried at Arlington National Cemetery, which, when the wind blows correctly, I can hear the sound of taps. I'll be reading from my book, In Search of Warm Breathing Things. These are personal, sometimes quirky poems. Often they tell stories. Many of the stories, as Ellen said, are about the death of a mother and the end of a marriage. They're about the agony and tenderness of our relationships with each other. I'll read 6 poems today. So the first poem is one that I wrote while taking a workshop with the wonderful Maryland poet, Rose Solari. And it takes place in a parking lot before parking apps existed. Solving for the unknown. Poetry class starts at 7:30. I arrive at 7:15. Parking costs 25 cents for 30 minutes. Meters are enforced till 10. Class ends at 9:45. When I spot classmates, I casually disclose, I left my watch at home. I've put 27 quarters in the meter. Is that enough? Each week, I find a different person to ask. I buy rolls of quarters at the bank. The teller can't tell me how many quarters I need. She says she doesn't understand poetry. Meter maids patrol the lot, ticket the scofflaws, extract clattering coins from machines. Tonight, I insert 5 quarters into my parking meter. Their drop, systolic rhythm. Their sequence, iambic pentameter. The quarters race through dark pipes, like cells raced through my mother's glands. When our father died, my brother and I lost 1/4 of our family. When our mother died, 1/3 of our family was gone. Now, here I am, stuffing quarters into a slot, calculating. The parking lot where this poem takes place is across from the Writer Center in Bethesda, Maryland, where the Café Muse readings took place in person before moving to this virtual platform. Thank you, Café Muse, all of you, for inviting me to read. I'm honored. And it's wonderful to see so many of you from all over the country. And that's one of the benefits of of these readings now being on this new platform. I guess it's not so new anymore, is it? After my mother died, a friend gave me a gift to a spa. This poem is about the memories and feelings that arose during the facial part of that visit. Day of Beauty, facial. The attendant knots a towel around my face to hold my chin and hair in place, like the towel the nurses wrapped around my mother's face to keep her jaw from dropping, as if we cared about that. The attendant crosses my hands on my chest, wraps a blanket around me, like the sheet the nurses wrapped around my mother after we crossed her hands on her chest. So she looked like she was praying, as if they needed to make her presentable, as if she weren't already beautiful, her face thin like a girl's. When they brought the gurney to take my mother away, we all helped wind her into that sheet and finally covered her face. So we never saw her again, so that the last touches she had were from those she loved. Today the attendant wraps me and turns me and touches me. She tells me, this is a day of beauty. Michael Davis, your beautiful guitar playing tonight and every reading. It's so soothing and uplifting. I always look forward to hearing you. I'm a big music lover, as Ellen alluded to. In fact, my piano is behind me, but I won't play. 2 composers have written music using my poetry as text. One series includes 8 poems, and that's been entitled To Cast a Shadow Again. It was set to music by the composer Eric Ewazen of Juilliard. Composer Carson Kuhlman of Harvard set a seasonal cycle of my poems to music, and this poem is from that series. The series is entitled Chasing the Moon Down. Overnight, maples turn into pumpkins, and the dog disappears for hours in his leaf-filled yard. He herds squirrels corner to corner. No acorn will be harvested on his watch. Too tired for his nighttime walk, he puts himself to bed at 8. Tonight, as the sun sets, wasps race to their nest, angry that their time is almost over. 7 deer tiptoe single file from their feeding ground to their sleeping ground. A full moon shines silver on the batwing begonias. And then it happens, you are there. The dog, overjoyed, brings his ball, his stick, anything to keep you. It's like that other sunset. For a long time, you had been too ill to look out the window. Suddenly, you saw the tops of the oaks. They glowed yellow. You asked, "How can I bear such beauty?" The next poem is from a new manuscript I've been working on. It takes place in a Turkish bath, a hammam, in the small coastal town of Bodrum, in the southwestern part of Turkey. The walls were covered with traditional blue and yellow tiles, and the roof was open in a huge circular hole, an oculus. No one spoke English at this non-tourist Turkish bath, and I don't speak Turkish. But there were so many silent welcomes, smiles, nonverbal interactions, from families lounging in terry cloth robes, and surprising to me, their children just running free and easy and naked throughout the hammam. Bodrum Hammam. Steam echoes off blue and yellow tiles. Rivulets stream down walls. Roof's oculus opens to Turkey's hot sky. We have this round room to ourselves. We dip ladles into heated pools, then tepid ones. It's like a Finnish sauna, but inside, in summer. My feet appear and then disappear in clouds. Our red checkered peshtamals, like Café, like Arafat wore, are as wet as puddles. A man enters. I lie down. He folds my hands over my heart. He washes me with huge towel-covered hands. Suds fly everywhere like blowing bubbles. He and I laugh. Then he washes my face. No one has ever washed my face, except my parents. I remember crossing my mother's hands over her chest after the end, seeing my father's hands crossed by someone else. My bones, sharp against those hard tiles, ache. All liquids have escaped me. I've never been so thirsty or so clean. We dressed the muezzin's afternoon call to prayer. Outside, I hear seagulls, smell the Aegean. You take photos of me at the hammam entrance. Later, I notice how sunken, how hollow-cheeked I look. Everything sucked out of me. This poem is one that Ellen referred to. It's the grammar poem, Ellen. It's about grammar, except it's not really about grammar. In it, I use some rules of grammar to tell the story of a relationship that is unraveling. Grammar's emotional rules. 1. Progressive forms, adjectives and adverbs. Angry, angrier, angriest. Positive, comparative, superlative forms. Example, I'm positively angry that you don't pay attention to me. Always use comparatives and superlatives with care. Example, I'm comparatively angrier day by day because you go out drinking. Example, I'm superlatively the angriest I've ever been because you just called me that awful word because I just called you a drunk. 2, misplaced limiting modifiers. Just is a limiting modifier. Anger can be just. Example, just anger as in simple anger, as in, I'm just angry that you drink every night. Or just anger as in righteous anger, as in, I'm joining the Women's Temperance Society because people like you are ruining my life and the life of others. Misplaced anger is never a misplaced modifier. Anger is difficult to modify. Anger can be limiting, but do not limit your anger. You should limit your drinking, but I'm allowed to be as angry as I want. 3, count and non-count nouns, both proper and common. Anger counts always. Anger can be proper if you don't become a harridan. If you become a harridan, anger is common. Anger always arrives in degrees, but anger is not always positive. I exceed all others in anger. I am positive about that. And one last poem. The final one is an abecedarian. It's an ancient Semitic form, often found in religious Hebrew poetry, and it's guided by alphabetic order. The first line begins with the letter A, the next with the letter B, and so on to Z. You'll hear that I jumpstart this poem with the letters A, B, C, and D all appearing in the title. So perhaps I cheated a bit. And plus, you'll note that, like many poets, I needed to cheat a bit with the letter X. Alcohol beckons constantly, derails each and every day earlier and earlier. Your breakfast juice, firewater, which means forlorn me, followed by medicinal gimlet. You're ginned up long before cocktail hour, hosed by metallic vodka, ice cubes clinking against cut crystal, those jazz Jezebels jockey with your reason. Your mind, the whole kit and caboodle, goes kablooey. You say, let the drinking begin. I say, you lush, it never stops, look in the mirror, that's you, smashed by margaritas. Not that you drink indiscriminately, no, you nurse only one rule, keep drinking. You pour another, pursue your pickled quest, a quagmire of doctored quinine. Righteous, rigid, ruined in rum, you're sloshed, snookered by scotch, trashed, tumbled under the table, useless. You're vacant, veer away from me, seek vermouth, weeping, whiskey wasted, wankered. I long to be an X, yearn to unyoke from you, you zonked zombie. Soon I will swing from a crystal chandelier, catapult through the open window, and disappear into the night. Zorro. No. Zorah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katherine. That was wonderful. Oh, I wish I had thought of some of those words when I tried to write an abecedarian. Now, the WordWorks Karen Alanier will lead our poets in a question and answer session.
Okay, well, I have a sort of a question you can take whatever way you like to take it. And both of you had interesting forms that you told your poems in. And you can either talk about that or you can talk about how in the world, with all of the sorrow in both of your work, you can also arrive at some modicum of levity. So take it for what you want, and whether it's form or otherwise. And I'll let Andrea go first.
Thanks, Karen. I don't know where I find the levity, except it's a sort of survival skill. It comes with time. About the numerology aspect of my work is easier to speak. I had a career as an accountant, and I love numbers. So when I'm writing poems, I like playing with patterns on the page. I like finding the right balance of white space and organization of lines to encapsulate the subject of the poem in some way. That gives me a lot of pleasure. I like to write sonnets, but I like to write non-traditional sonnets, playing with the 14 lines, breaking them down the middle. There's a poem in my book which is called Pinstripe Bullies, which looks like two towers on the page, two columns of a line, a word or two. And it doesn't always happen as neatly as that, but when it does, I'm very happy. So I'd like to hear Katherine talk about humor, because it's really dazzling in addition to the beauty of her poems.
Thank you, Andrea. And like you, I love numbers. Humor just seems to be hardwired in some of us. It sometimes comes out at awkward moments, unfortunately, but I like forms, and when I was in high school, I fell in love with Marianne Moore's syllabics, so I wrote syllabics a lot, even though I couldn't understand Marianne Moore, really, her poetry. She still is out there for me, but I love her work. And then I got into this rhythm when I was in college of I would play solitaire to relax, and then however the numbers that would show up at the top, those would be the if I ended up with a 3 up here and an ace up here, and then those would be the number of syllables I had to use per line. So it was, I liked the chance of that. So I don't know if I can answer it any better than that.
I think you both did a terrific job answering the question, because the question was a hard one. And I think you both did amazing readings that exhibited form and the contrast between sorrow and levity. So thank you very much. I'm turning it back to Ellen to close out the evening.
Well, thanks, Karen, for those questions, because it was lovely to hear the poets talk about those things. And Andrea and Katherine, thank you so much for sharing your poems with us. They were remarkable. Michael, thank you for your beautiful music. Thanks also to Karen Alanier and the WordWorks for sponsoring Café Muse. Thanks to Henry for working his technical magic. And thank you to my fellow co-hosts, Susan Oki, Renee Garrity, Leah Johnson, Henry Crawford, Bergie Zenhausen, and Majda Gama. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for coming to be here with us for tonight's program. Without you, Café Muse couldn't exist. If you want to watch tonight's program again, it will be up on Café Muse's YouTube channel tomorrow. And you can extend your enjoyment by purchasing the poets' books. Again, the link is in the chat. And by letting others know about our series. Please join us for the WordWorks Poets versus the Pandemic program on Wednesday, September 22nd at 7 o'clock. Featuring Hiram LaRue and guest poets Lauren Camp and Caroline Joyner. I hope you can come to the next Café Muse program on Monday, October 4th, featuring poets Leah Johnson and Kiki Petrosino. Please make sure you've registered on our Café Muse website so that you'll receive information on the event and also receive the Zoom link. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and I hope we'll see you again soon.